live. Trying to set up this camera. I don't know how to do this. Oh, there's a little tub. Looking rough. This is first thing in the morning. This is real life, you guys. So I'm not even trying to fix myself up. I rinse my face. I don't know if I have sleep in my eyes, but since I've been taking you guys along with me, and it looks like we're really connecting on these lives, I thought I would take you on with me in what I'm calling my morning chill time with the Lord. And I'll be honest, I had already started. Let me turn on my computer so I see what this live is doing, and I can see your comments. I'm already about halfway through it. Okay. So just to let you know what I do. All right. I see the live. Get rid of this. This is my laptop over here. Just to let you guys know, I know it's super early, but if you guys want to do a live with me around my Bible study, this is how early I get up. Matter of fact, it's about 6:43 in the morning, so I would be almost wrapping things up now. I kind of got up a little bit on the later side this morning, and my daughter, I'm not going to point the camera at her, but she's already sitting here because a lot of times my youngest, a lot of times she'll set her alarm and get up early so she could start early on her schoolwork so she could finish. She could finish her schoolwork as close to after lunch as possible. And so she's already up. So this is late for me, and I'm about halfway through what I typically do. So what I do is I've been doing a Bible in a year plan. My husband, really encouraged us to do Bible in a year. And so I've been doing a Bible in a year plan, and I'm trying to see where the camera is. Hold on, let me see where the camera is so I look at y'all in the right place. Okay, camera's on this side. So anyway, I've been doing the Bible in a year plan through the U Bible. Is it the U Bible app? So if you do Bible in a year plan, there's like 50 million Bible in a year plans you can follow. So what that does is it organizes the Bible in such a way that you can chronologically kind of follow through the story from creation through all the way through the end of the New Testament, but it interweaves books of the Bible that don't necessarily tell a chronological story, but give insight to certain times. Like for example, right now I'm reading, the book of Kings, right? Second Kings. I think I'm up to Second Kings, and there are parts of the Psalms and parts of Proverbs, that kind of lend more depth and insight to what's happening to these people and what's going on. So I like that because it kind of helps me to have a more in-depth view of whatever I'm reading. I'm reading about other people's lives because this is one way in the Bible. Like, I like reading these stories because as I grow in my relationship with the Lord, the Bible says he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So as I grow in my relationship with the Lord, I find a lot of relevance in seeing what his interaction was with other people. How things worked out for other people. Like when we're in the midst of whatever we're in the midst of, sometimes we don't understand what's going on behind the scenes because we live in this reality. But the Bible says that there's a reality that's even more real than this reality. And I love superhero movies. I've ever since I was a kid. And that kind of fantasy storytelling kind of helps me to kind of wrap my mind around that in real life, I'm living in this reality, but there's another reality that's even greater. And that's the reality that God operates out of. and we're spirit beings. And so I need, because I'm so, bound up by this reality that I can see, sometimes it's kind of hard for me to wrap my mind around and operate in the fact that this is not the greater reality, and God has systems in place that I need to learn about and understand. And so I like to read about other people's stories with God and their interactions with God, what actually happened. And the Bible is awesome because it gives you insight about what was happening in the supernatural realm and what was actually true about why certain things happen. I think the good example of that is the story of Job. Him and his friends thought, well, it's because I did this or because I did that, or I messed up in this way, or I failed in that way. Or Job's like, well, I can't see how I messed up. Please, God, show me, why is this happening to me? That's the story of the tragedy where he lost everything. He lost his kids, he lost his wealth, he lost his position of honor in his community. You know what I'm saying? And then his body got horribly sick, and so he was physically miserable. And he had been living his life right to the best of his ability. And I like that story because it was a real struggle for him to understand why these things, like, that was the biggest thing he wanted to know. Why are these things happening to me? Why? He knew that there was a realm beyond the realm that he could see with his eyes. And, I like that story because we get a look into the supernatural. God was really proud of how he had lived his life and happy with how he had done things. But something was going on, but it showed how the enemy works, how he came in and he accused Job, how he came in and claimed that the only reason why Job serves you so faithfully is because you gave him everything. You know what I'm saying? And he came in and it shows how he came in with a plan to prove Job wasn't faithful, and how God allowed the plan to unfold. But we really see how the devil can't really do whatever he wants to do, because as he tries to execute his plan, he's limited by what God allows to happen. Okay? And then, we see how long of a struggle Job has, but how limited the devil is in all of this. And then we see what the friends advise him and what the friends think about what reality really is. And then we come to the resolution at the end that they were wrong. And a lot of the ideas that the friends have, that, God, bad things can't happen to good people. So it's happening to you because you messed up. You know what I'm saying? This kind of perception, is good to see, what was really going on and that they were actually wrong. You know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, I'm not studying Job right now. Job is something I've been reading with my daughter. I read that with her these past few weeks. Mostly for the poetic language, doing that for poetry instead of the other poetry that came with our homeschool curriculum. But, I brought that up because the reason I'm spending this chill time with the Lord is I want to, these are good examples for me to understand. Like, God does interact with me one on one on a personal level, specifically where I am, but it's also good to reinforce that. How do you hear God's voice? How do you understand what he sounds like? How do you know what he would do and what he wouldn't do? Getting into these stories really helps me to do that because he's still the same person. Okay, and so right now I'm studying the book of Second Kings, and I want to read with you this account of the death of Elisha. I know everybody knows Elijah, the prophet. Elisha is his successor. And so I was reading Second Kings chapter 13, and I'm going to read what it says. Verse 14. Elisha had become sick, and I read from the New King James Version. I like other versions, but I noticed that with the revelation that God is giving me, I noticed that I appreciate the wording in the New King James. New King James. I don't need all of these and the thous. I appreciate the wording of the New King James really well for kind of understanding where the passages are going. So that's why I'm reading out of that. So Elisha had become sick with the illness of which he would die. Then Joash, the king of Israel, came down to him and wept over his face and said, "Oh, my father, the chariots of Israel and their horsemen." Now, this is an interesting saying because this is the exact same thing that Elisha says to Elijah when the chariots of fire, when they're out in the wilderness and the chariots of fire separate them and God takes Elijah up into heaven. Okay, so it's almost like he's giving him the final greeting that Eli Eli um Elisha gave Elijah. So this is another, to me, way of confirming that this man's going to die, because he's sick on his sick bed of the illness that is going to kill him. But now the king of Israel comes to hear a word from him. Okay? And Elisha said to him, "Take a bow and some arrows." Now, when he's about to give him a word from God, and during this time when these prophets gave people words from God, they didn't just say what God told them to say. A lot of times they took them through an object lesson, they gave them a visual of the word. So they acted something out while they gave them the word. So, and Elisha said to him, "Take a bow and some arrows." So he took himself a bow and some arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, "Put your hand on the bow." So he put his hand on it. And Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. And he said, "Open the east window." And he opened it. Then Elisha said, "Shoot." And he shot. And he said, "The arrow of the Lord's deliverance and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. For you must strike the Syrians at Aphek till you have destroyed them." Okay, so a little background knowledge. Okay, at this time, Syria is tearing Israel up. Okay, because of disobedience and all of that, because when God brought Israel into the promised land, he told them, "If you obey me and keep my commandments and serve me alone as God, all these blessings are going to happen to you." And it's blessings about everything that they have in every aspect of their life, how they'll prosper, how they'll be lenders and not borrowers, how their kingdom will be established forever. He promised them blessings if they obeyed him. But he also said, "But if you disobey me and you go off and you do your own thing and you try to be like these people in these lands around you who served other idols, other gods that are not God, if you try to be like them, there's a curse that follows disobedience. And that curse involves all kinds of stuff like, famine and sickness and plagues and, other nations coming and conquering them and taking them down, and fear and a lack of peace. And, go look at it. It's in Deuteronomy. Go look at it. Okay. Very specific. When you obey God, this is what your experience will be in the natural realm. When you disobey God, this is where your experience will be in the natural realm. And so as I read through the book of Kings and Joshua and all of those, I saw how everything went down with whether they obeyed God and didn't obey God, and how either they walked in the blessings or they walked in the cursings. But there was division in Israel to the extent that at this point, now there are two kingdoms in the promised land instead of one. To the north, you have, the kingdom that followed the line of David. Is it the north? I'm directionally challenged. I think it's to the south. You have the kingdom that followed, I think it's to the south. The kingdom that followed the line of David becomes the kingdom of Judah. And then to the north, you have the kingdom of Israel, that kind of started doing a whole twisted thing. Because when the two kingdoms separated, with Jeroboam becoming the king of the kingdom of Israel, Jeroboam was worried about being able to keep his hold on the northern kingdom, the kingdom of Israel. And so, how they have to do certain sacrifices. And, Solomon had built a temple where those things would happen. So Jeroboam was thinking, if they have to travel to Jerusalem to do the sacrifices, they might be influenced by the king of Judah. So the other kingdom that followed David's line is the kingdom of Judah. So they're like, I don't want them being influenced by the king, by this, the kingdom of Judah. I might lose support from them. So I want to keep them out of Jerusalem. So he came up with his own version of worship. He set up his own high places. He anointed his own priests, and he set up some kind of golden calf image, like the golden calf that they did in the wilderness, that Aaron built in the wilderness when they were coming out of Egypt. Okay? And he told Israel, this is your God. So it's not that he created a new calf religion. What he did was he set up his own version of the temple to worship the same God, but his own version of the temple. And so that the people could stay in his vicinity and worship and not have to travel to Jerusalem, which would threaten his hold in his mind of the kingdom. Okay, which he didn't really have to he didn't really have to fear that, because God had anointed him king over Israel. So when God anoints you, nobody can take that away from you. But we see this weakness in Jeroboam. So he didn't worry about obeying God fully, because God had set up a way he wanted his temple to be. He had set up a way he wanted them to worship. He set all that up when they were in the wilderness with the tabernacle. And Solomon modeled the temple that was in Jerusalem after all the stuff God told him in the wilderness, and God approved that. But God didn't approve Jeroboam's thing. So in the books that talk about the kings, over and over, the kings are judged according to whether or not they followed God fully with their hearts and obeyed like David, or whether or not they did their own thing like Jeroboam. So Jeroboam set that up, but it opened the door for later kings to then also add their idols to it. So they had the twisted version of worship that Jeroboam came up with, and then they added their own idols, from the Canaanites and the Baals and the Asherah, and they set up, idols alongside of what they were thinking was still worshiping God. And God does not accept this mixed human, idea of how to worship him. He tells us how to worship him, and so now the curse of disobedience is coming on these people. Okay. And part of the curse of disobedience is that these nations that I would protect you from if you obeyed me, now they're going to conquer you. So this king of Syria was tearing them up. Okay. Matter of fact, Elisha, was the prophet that told the king of Syria, Hazael, which is interesting because as a prophet of God, he was recognized by the whole region as being someone who could hear from God. So even these pagan gods who weren't coming to worship God were coming to him for a word, almost like a fortune telling, and he would tell them what God said. And Hazael, when he was just a servant of the king of Syria before him, Ben-Hadad, when he came to Elisha told him, because Ben-Hadad was sick and he wanted to know, am I going to die from this sickness? So he sent Hazael to Elisha to find out. And Elisha told Hazael that he would be king, that Ben-Hadad would die, but not of the sickness, but that he would die, but that Hazael would be the next king. And then Elisha starts weeping in front of him because he sees what kind of king Hazael will be and what Hazael will do to his people, and how Hazael is going to tear them up, even to the extent of ripping open the bellies of pregnant women so that their babies would fall out. This was a demoralizing thing that people in ancient civilizations did to their conquered people to completely demoralize them. My daughter's coming down for school. I am doing a live. I positioned the camera so that it's facing the window, but you can see her computer screen behind me. So if she comes, that you will kind of see her, but I'll kind of, you can still come if you want, but when you come, I'll make sure you're not on screen if you don't want to be. She doesn't want to be on screen. So anyway, so that's the background that I'm giving you. So Haziel is tearing them up. Okay? So this is a very bad foe. So he describes the arrow that he tells him to shoot out of the window as the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. And he tells them that you have to utterly destroy this king. So verse 18 said, then he said, take that. So he shoots them out. Then he said, take the arrows. So he took them. And he said, these are still the arrow of God's deliverance and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. Okay. Then he said, take the arrows. So he took them. And he said to the king, strike the ground. So he's supposed to strike the ground with the arrows. Okay. And so he struck the ground 3 times and stopped. Okay. And the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck Syria till you had destroyed it. But now you will strike Syria only 3 times. And I've heard this story many, many times before. And my thing with this story is, well, how was he supposed to know that? You just told him to strike. You didn't tell him how many times to strike. Like, how was he supposed to know that the number of times he struck the ground was going to determine how much of a deliverance they were going to have from Syria? And today, to this morning, is the first time I caught some revelation about why Elisha was angry and why King Joash blew it with this word demonstration thing. Okay, the arrow is called the arrow of the Lord's deliverance and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. That's what the arrow represents. Okay, so it's like a weapon in his hand. These people have been tearing you up. Okay, at the very least, emotion would have been like, what? This is the arrow of God's deliverance. Deliver me, deliver me, deliver me, deliver me, deliver me, deliver me. Tear you up, tear you up, tear you up, tear you up, tear you up. That should have been his passion. That should have been his passion. Okay? Because he knew Elisha was the man of God, that he was telling him the truth. Because this man's word had come to pass. And this is the end of his life of being a faithful prophet over Israel. So his word is constantly coming to pass. He's calling this the arrow of deliverance. Okay, think of this guy, Syria. He's like a precursor to Hitler. Okay, this is how devastating, his effect was on the Israelite people. Okay, this man, you are holding the arrow of God's deliverance from this man. And you're going to strike the ground 3 times, dude? That's the level of your faith. That's the level of your passion against this situation. That's the level of your righteous rage and indignation against this king. You should have been tearing the ground up with the arrow of God's deliverance from Syria. Okay, so I think this is a story, how far will you go? What do you understand about what God is putting in your hand? This is why the devil just be tearing us up all the time. He's not tearing us up because he's so strong. He's tearing us up because we believe his lies. He's tearing us up because we lack passion. The passion and the determination and the focus to do what it takes to grab and hold on to what God has put in our hands, for our deliverance. So I was reading this story, and that's why I wanted to come on here and do this live. How can you apply this to what's going on in your life and even in the world today? These things, these principles still apply. Okay? And so that's all I really wanted to share with you guys this morning. I know it's super early. People have popped in and out. People probably trying to get their day started, trying to get ready for work. But this is what I do in the morning, and it's what I love it so much. I'm not over here struggling, I leap out of my bed. I can't wait to get in here and see what God is going to show me. He's been showing me what a mighty God he is. You know what I'm saying? And how important perception is. So I get down here, and I read through these stories, and sometimes I can't picture things. And so I Google maps and commentaries and things like that. I really like enduringword.com as a commentary, because they do use the New King James Version, so it's perfect. I like to use my paper Bible. I went back to a paper Bible, and I underline the heck out of this. And whenever I'm underlining this, when I'm getting super excited, and I don't know, you probably can't see very well, but this whole thing is underlined. It's underlined because I'm excited. I get the word of God is just jumping off the pages, and I'm not doing this to prepare a message or a sermon or to lead a Bible study. I'm just doing this to just get to know God, my loving Father, and also to get to know myself. You know, He's the one that knows who I am, and what my purpose is, and it's wonderful, you guys. It's not drudge. There was a time in my life when, you know, it was hard to plow through it. But God can open up your mind and understanding so that you could really understand and see how these things tie together. That's why I like enduringword.com, because there's a lot of historical background and reference that gives you context to a lot of these passages. And so what I'll do is I'll read the schedule on Read the Bible in the Year first. And whatever God has given me, I'll fill up these notebooks with it. And I really like these Ray Dunn notebooks. Love them. I buy them at Marshall's, TJ Maxx, places like that. And since I started doing a Bible in a year, I didn't do it from the beginning. But this is the stack of books I've already filled up. Okay? And I keep a stack. This is my stack of blank ones. So whenever I'm in Marshall's or one of these, you can come in. Whenever I'm in Marshall's or one of these stores, I pick up a new one. And I just write and I write and I write and I write and I fill it up and I write the revelation that God has shown me. And then I go and after I read it on my own, I go on enduringword.com and I read the commentary for those passages just to get the historical context and the background information. And the reason I liked it was because I would go and find, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I saw. That's exactly what God showed me. Oh, but I didn't know this person was king in this region, or that this ties back to that. And, they have all their references linked. So I could just hover over the passage that they're referencing and read it right there. It's very convenient, And before I know it, hours have passed. Hours have passed and I'm in God's presence and I've gone through this process and it's changed me. By the time Sunday used to come around, I would be starving to death for the word of God. And during this shutdown, sometimes it's virtual, people not meeting at all. I would be starving. I can't imagine getting my food like that. Or reading one verse a day, or I read Psalms, a couple of Psalms today, and that was the extent of my diet. But now, you guys, I feel like I'm stuffed. I'm stuffed. It's the Word of God, and I love it. I don't know if I'm able to communicate, how wonderful it is, and it's changing me. It's changing me and it's helping me to overcome, a lot of the weaknesses I've struggled with for years, and it's not with me focused on doing some of this self-help stuff I used to do before, God's just changing me because his word is coming alive in me. And it's a wonderful thing, you know. And so I just wanted to take y'all with me this morning. You know, I don't know, maybe I don't know, maybe I'll look back on this video and be a little embarrassed about how impassioned, you know, I was, but it's genuine, you guys. Could you imagine getting that excited about the Bible? Good morning, Claudia Lee. Yeah, yeah, I'm sorry, but to have done it so early, but I wanted to do it in real time. But this'll still be on my channel. I'm not taking it down, so feel free to go back, you know, and watch it because it was so good, you guys. It was good. And that's another thing that I noticed that God is doing with me. Like, I'm gonna marinate on this revelation some more, and then he'll give me more, you know. And maybe it'll be right away, maybe it won't be right away, but this is what I mean when I talk about having a relationship. You know, I'm not doing this just to check off I did my Bible reading today, and I was a faithful a faithful Christian, that I had my quiet time with the Lord. I don't even think of it as a quiet time with the Lord, because as you can see, I'm not that quiet. I try to be quiet because it's like I usually get up like around 4:30 in the morning to come and start this process. So my whole family is sleeping and I don't want to wake them up, but I get excited. I get excited. It's not a quiet time with the Lord, not really. It's not really a quiet time, but I think of it as my chill time with the Lord. Like I'm just hanging out with the Father. I'm hanging out with the Holy Spirit. You know, Jesus that's in me. You know, I'm hanging out, you know, and we're interacting, and it's wonderful. And sometimes my hand feels like it's gonna fall off because, you know, one entry, I'm filling up pages and pages and pages of these notes. I'm just what's coming to me, you know, questions that I have about what I'm reading, and you know, it's wonderful. So I wanted to come and share that with you guys. But I'm gonna come off this live so I can finish this Bible study, because after Bible study, I do a couple of chores. Like I like to go upstairs, fix my bed. I don't know about you, but fixing my bed helps me to feel better. Uh, Walking through my room and everything's in place, that I like how that makes me feel really good. You know, to put away some laundry, put the dishes away, get dinner going in the crock pot, stuff like that, and then come and sit down and start my process for school with the girls. They start their process independently, you know, because as we shared in a previous video, I did a live where I took you guys through my morning routine. So their stuff is already spinning, and then I could jump in. So I need to get off so I could finish my Bible study so I'm not off track. But I just wanted to come on here and share this with you. And if you guys want, please give me a thumbs up if you would like me to continue to share these. I'd be happy to share these. I share these a lot more. I did a whole series on my Instagram. My handle on my Instagram is #1 cherished daughter. That's my handle on Instagram. I have a highlight on there. I did a whole series called What Jesus Said, you know, where I went through and you know, I went through a number of books in the New Testament. I think mostly Matthew and John, mostly. I can't remember right now, but just looking at things that Jesus said, that he actually said, and talking about what God is showing me that he means by those things. Because we know a lot about what people think about Jesus, but we can know who he was by what he said, you know. And so I highlighted, and so they're only like a minute long, so you can go check that out. The highlight is what Jesus said. Claudia says, God is so faithful. I have been crying out to him saying, here I am, use me, and he is drawing me closer. We just have to be willing and available. You're right. You're right. That's been my story too, Claudia. That's been my story too. And looking back on the way I was before, you know, I'm like, I can't even relate to the me that felt like, this was a lot to read. Like I get to the end, and if you ever try to do a Bible in a year, it's a lot to read. But I get to the end of one day and I'm like, oh, that's it. It's over. Like, oh man, oh, I got to get up and start school. You know what I'm saying? I leap out of my bed like, yes, and I'm married. So if my husband's awake and he like reaches, married folk know how sometimes your husband will reach across for some affection, etc. I'm just like tiptoeing out of the bed. I'm tiptoeing out of the room. I'm like, don't stop me, don't stop me, don't stop me, don't stop me, because I can't wait. I can't wait to get into this word. Is that good? I'm not even exaggerating. But let me go, you guys. I'm gonna go. So you guys have a blessed day, blessed morning. Again, give me a thumbs up if you want me to do more of these. Uh, be blessed. Hold on. My daughter needs me, so I'm telling her to hold on as I say goodbye to you guys. Be blessed.